Welcome to Tenant Screening, how to find the best tenants in 5 easy steps. My name is Nelda Schulte, just like it says here on my banner stand, and I have been a property investor for over 18 years with properties in Alberta and BC. And I've also owned a property management company in Calgary with my husband that we ran for 5 years. And I've worked as a curriculum writer for the Real Estate Council of Alberta and a real estate writer for quite a few years right now. So I feel like I'm well qualified to support you in your landlording journey. I'm going to share my screen so that we can start this PowerPoint presentation and webinar. And as you enter, I can enter people into the restream, live stream, or you can enter through Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn. So I'm looking forward to seeing you and participating with you one way or another. I'm just going to share my screen in about 2 shakes. There it is. So as mentioned, my name is Nelda Schulte, and I got into helping people with landlording because back when I was working as a music teacher, which is my first career, and I started with a low income and a big student loan, I just didn't think it was possible for me to ever own a house, let alone a rental investment. But I didn't let that stop me. So I started attending investment seminars where I learned about house hacking or buying a house with a suite and renting out either rooms or a suite with 2 roommates to help pay the mortgage. And all of a sudden I thought, hey, I can do this. I can figure it out. I can buy a house and I can have the house paid for while I'm living in it. But once I had the house, I realized that I had to get a tenant, otherwise it wasn't going to be profitable. And that became a whole other learning curve that I was completely unprepared for. So that's why I want to help property investors and property landlords who are self-managing bypass some of the landmines that I stepped in. Because let's face it, mistakes you make in real estate cost thousands of dollars and they can have legal consequences. And I want to help you avoid as many financial and emotional pain points as possible. So if you're wondering what qualifies me to teach this course, as mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm a property investor for 18 years. I have properties, my husband and I have properties in Alberta and BC. And for 5 years, my husband and I co-ran a residential Alberta property management business. And I also worked for the Real Estate Council of Alberta, or RECA, as a curriculum writer for all of the legislated real estate courses that real estate professionals have to take in Alberta in order to practice. I also currently run neldaschulte.com, which is an online business that supports residential property investors who want to self-manage. And it supports people with articles, videos, courses, interviews with industry experts. We just did one a couple nights ago with Don Gray of Edmonton Eviction Services. And I also do mentoring. And you can find all those services and information about me on my website, www.neldaschulte.com. I also have a Facebook group. Whoops. I think I have to go forward. My Facebook group is called the Real Estate Investment Resource Network. I'm going to change it to neldaschulte.com probably within the next couple of days. And that's for Alberta landlords, but it also has a lot of generic information for landlords in general that can help you in your landlord journey. So who is this course for? Who should be here? Well, whether you have no experience, or you have some experience, or you have lots of experience, this is the right webinar for you right now because everyone is welcome. Whether you're completely new to being a landlord, this webinar will give you a solid foundation of what to do when you're screening a tenant. If you have some experience, but maybe you're not 100% happy with your results, this webinar can help you course correct and get back on track to find really good tenants. Or if you're really experienced and you've been having some results that you like, maybe mixed results, or you've got great results and you just want to learn some new tips and tricks, I nearly got myself into trouble there, then this webinar is for you. So what are we going to learn today? We're going to learn how to advertise, how to pre-screen tenants, how to process an application form and what you should have in your application form. We're going to talk about reference checks, how to verify them, how to validate them, and what kinds of questions to ask them once you have them. And we're also going to talk about the all-important credit check. And if you stay to the very end, I have a very special offer to share with you today, and it's just for today. So stick around, and you've got something good coming your way. I'd like you to meet Paul. So when my husband and I ran a property management business, we'd frequently get calls from distressed tenants and landlords, mostly landlords. And Paul called us because he was at his wit's end. He had bad tenants, and he had bought a house as an investment property that he wanted to use for his retirement. And he got it in a great neighborhood. He fixed it up. He turned it into 2 suites, an upstairs and a downstairs suite. He spent about $100,000 in renovations. He rented the upstairs quite quickly to good tenants. He rented the downstairs to these 2 women who told him they were students, and they had a really good cry story. And he felt sorry for them, and he let them in. But as soon as they moved in, he started having all kinds of problems with them. And then they started threatening to sue him, and he was very worried about that. He didn't know what to do. So that's when he picked up the phone and he called me. So at that point, I said, well, I just like to get a little bit of background information from you. So could you tell me if you've checked their landlord or their work references, or if you ran a credit check, or if you have a copy of the move-out inspection and the move-in inspection, or do you have a copy of the lease? Well, he hadn't done any of that stuff. So I said, well, just curious, Paul, I'm just wondering why you wouldn't do any of those things. And he said, well, I didn't want to look like a jerk. And I said, well, are you running a soup kitchen or are you running a business? And he said, well, I'm running a business, of course. And I said, well, when you're applying for a job, does it bother you to fill out an application form or to provide references to your employer? And he said, well, of course not. That's the process. And I said, well, there's a process also for tenant screening, and that's what you need to find. And there's also a process you need to put in place for the paperwork. And once you've done that, it gets rid of probably 99% of your tenant problems. So once you put that process in place, you're pretty good to go. It's not 100% foolproof because nothing is, but once you get rid of your tenants, we can course correct. This isn't a permanent situation you're going to find yourself in. You will find your way out of here, and then you need to just course correct with a really good screening process. And that's what I'm going to teach you today. I'm going to start with advertising. So we're going to talk about who you want as tenants, which kind of online platform you should choose, or which platform to advertise, how to write your ad to attract tenants, how to check your comparable properties so that you can price your property accordingly, how to post your ad, where to post your ad, how to monitor the results, and how to tweak the ad depending on what's happening. So step 1 is advertising. So who do you want as a tenant or tenants? And then you want to ask yourself this, because if you have, let's say, a bachelor suite condo that is 370 square feet, and you have a family of 8 people with 2 show dogs who want to move in, obviously that's not going to work. There are minimum housing and health standards that you have to adhere to, and the condos also have rules for how many people they'll allow in a suite and whether or not they allow pets. So you have to be screening those people out before you take the time and the effort to drive down and show them a property that you know is not going to suit them. And so that's why you need to choose first who you want as tenants. You also need to choose an online platform that's known and used by tenants, that's well trafficked by tenants. And then you need to write the ad to attract the types of tenants that you want to attract. So that goes back to who you want as tenants. If you know that your property is best suited to one person or a couple who who are single professionals or students or whatever, then you can gear your ad to those people. So we'll be talking about that as well. I'm going to show you a couple examples. This is the first one of an ad that I wrote for a seniors facility. So this was a seniors townhouse complex. They only accepted people who were over 50, and they did not allow children, and it was legal. And so I put the heading down, "A beautiful place an empty nester can call home." And within this, I wrote the ad to attract people who wanted convenience. They wanted amenities that were very close by, wanted to live in a nice, quiet neighborhood that had lots of green space and beautiful trees, that was beautiful year-round. All the types of things that a senior would want. Close to transportation, the C train, the buses, all those things were included in this article, on this advertisement. And that's exactly who the advertisement attracted. It was a senior couple who did not have any children, because the complex only allowed seniors, it didn't allow children. And it was close to all kinds of amenities, and that suited them just perfect. And then I wrote this ad. This ad was for a beautiful area in an area of Calgary called Mackenzietown. Mackenzietown is kind of a young, up-and-coming neighborhood that's kind of geared towards professional families, and young families. They have tons of things close by that families love. They've got schools, they've got recreation centers, they've got parks, all kinds of shopping, convenience stores, dance, karate, martial arts, skating, everything is right there. So I geared this ad to speak to people who would be looking for those types of things in that area. And that's exactly who we attracted. We attracted a young family with 2 kids who really loved the area. The kids went to school close by, and it was perfect for them. Now, word of warning when you're writing your ads. If you write your ad specifying that you will not accept spaghetti monsters, it could potentially get you into hot water. Not because there's a real spaghetti monster and you're discriminating against them, but because you have to be careful that your advertising does not exclude anyone based on race, religion, sexual orientation, or any of the grounds that are specified in the Alberta Human Rights Act. If you are wanting a copy of the Alberta Human Rights Act, here it is. Here's the link. I'll just leave it there for a couple of seconds. And that will show you what areas, what grounds the Human Rights Act protects. So what should you not say in an advertisement? Well, if you say adult building or not suitable for children, then you're discriminating, you're excluding children and young people. If you say must have working income or must provide proof of employment, then you're excluding people who are employed, because there could be people who are trust fund babies, who are retired. If you're seeking a mature couple, if you write that in your ad, then you're excluding people who are not mature. You're excluding young people, students, people under a certain age. So you want to leave those things out. If you say ideal for a quiet couple, then you're excluding anyone who isn't a couple. Similarly, if you say suitable for single professional, then you're excluding couples, families. Female, you're excluding males. Suits mature individual or couple. Those are, as you can see, these are all descriptions that exclude certain groups, and you really can't write that in your ad. If you say not soundproof, it may indicate a bias against families with children, so you even have to be careful with that. And then just a word of warning about pets. If you have someone who is non-sighted or they can't hear and they have a service pet, you cannot discriminate against the pet. The pet is protected under the Human Rights Code. It's not considered a pet, it's considered a service companion. So even though you might say no pets, you're not allowed to discriminate against people who have a legitimate service animal. So I know we've covered a lot already. I'm just going to go over this briefly. We talked about who you want as tenants, like who actually fits into your property and into that neighborhood. What does that neighborhood and that property attract? What legally can you how many people can you legally have in the property? what does a condo allow? What does your house allow? What are the space requirements that are allowable? We've talked about how to attract them with your ad. So how to gear your ad when in the body, talking about the amenities or the features and the benefits of the property that will attract the kind of person that you know would be comfortable living in your property. And then we've also talked about what not to say so that you're not violating any human rights codes. We're going to talk a little bit now about calculating the right rental price, because this one trips a lot of landlords up. We've had landlords who have a really nice property that they've lived in and now they're moving out. They've gotten a job elsewhere or they got a transfer and they want to rent out their beloved house. And they think, well, it should be worth X amount of dollars because I think it's a great house. Well, it might be, but you need to check comparable properties on other sites just to see what other people are advertising it for, to see if people are willing to pay that. You can charge as much as you like, but if people aren't willing to pay it, you're not going to get a tenant. So we've got a couple sites that I've used in the Calgary area, which is where I live, in Calgary, Alberta, and one of them is Rentboard and the other one is Rent Faster, which is the one I'm displaying here. And Rent Faster, once you log in there, you can check comparables, and I'll show you how. So the first thing you want to do is you want to check what area. So there are filters. On the right-hand side, it says more filters. So you can specify keywords, communities, proximity, and that will take you to the next area where it has more filters for you to fill in. So you're looking at specific ads for pricing, amenities, age, size, etc. And all these different properties are going to pop up and show you what the price and the size and the amenities, and you can scroll through the pictures and get a really good understanding of how your property compares to these rental properties. And then you can fill in your type of property, whether it's a condo, house, apartment, etc., how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, furnished or unfurnished, and then proximity. So it likes to have the postal code so it can see what other areas it's close to. So the filters include the type of property, the number of bedrooms, whether it's furnished or unfurnished, which communities are close by, which community is it in, and then when you're done, you click search. And then there's this really kind of neat little tool in Rent Faster that under Count, and it's called the pricing tool. So once you click on the pricing tool, and it's down here, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, under the inbox. Once you click that, you're going to get this really cool little market overview, and that shows you the current listing prices. It shows you historical number of listings, historical average price, and the average days on the market. And you can just run your mouse over top of these different areas and it shows you what the price range is, which is just a great little tool. So the search results will give you the number of rentals, the communities you choose. It'll give you a minimum price. They'll give you a maximum price, and they'll give you an average price. So it's an extremely useful tool. Of course, there are other platforms for comparables. It's not the only one, but this one is a great place to start if you live in the Alberta or Canada area and you want to price your property correctly, and you want to see what the minimum prices are and the average prices. So once your ad is posted, you can view the stats. So let's say it's up and running already. You've got everything filled in. You're all proud of yourself. You posted all your pictures, and then you can take a look at the views. So most of these ads have, like on the lower right-hand corner in blue, they have a view summary. So they'll show you how many people looked today, this week, this month, and in total. And that will give you an indication of how your ad is doing. So what I found is you're going to have one or more of these different scenarios, sometimes all of them during different times when your ad is running. So firstly, you'll either have lots of views, but no calls or emails. You might have low views. You might have tons of calls, tons of showings, and tons of appointments, and everybody wants to rent your property, which is a very happy dilemma indeed. Or you could have lots of appointments, but no applications. So how do we remedy these? So if you have lots of views and no calls, you probably need to drop your price a little bit. So I recommend dropping it about $50 a week. So start with $50, see how your ad does in a week. If you've got tons of calls, showings, and appointments, and you've got all these people wanting to fill in applications, you've got a really happy dilemma. And you should probably raise the price. So you can start raising it by $50 or $100. And then what happens then is you end up with a smaller pool of people who are really serious about renting the property and they can afford it. If you have low views, there are a few things you can do. Sometimes the picture that you placed as a main picture that you think is what people will want to look at first isn't what tenants want to look at first. And I'll give you an example. I was advertising a basement suite in the house I live in, and I thought that the great feature about the house is that it's got this fabulous kitchen. It had a brand new IKEA kitchen. It's got 5 big windows. It doesn't look at all like a basement suite, and the kitchen is fantastic. So I put the picture of the kitchen for the main picture, and I really wasn't getting very many views. So then I switched it to the entrance of our house, which has a nice red door. And when you open it up, there are all these beautiful, colorful wall hangings. And as soon as I did that, my phone started ringing. So I started having people who are really serious about renting the property and wanting to book an appointment. So that's all it took at that point. Other times, you can change the picture by adding a little bit of color to the picture. Like we've done this in the past as well. If you have all these houses that all kind of look the same, they all look good, but they're kind of bland looking. You want your ad to pop when tenants are scrolling through all these different ads. So you can add some color. You can put potted plants, the red pots or red flowers on either side. You could put a bright picture on the entrance wall so that the door is open and have something really bright when they come in, so that bright picture or those bright plants pop when people are looking through all the ads that all look the same, and then they see that one that's got color in it. The other thing you could do is you could drop the price. And then there again, you mentioned you could drop by $50 in the first week and see how that works and see if your phone is starting to ring and people are wanting to book appointments. And then lastly, you have lots of appointments and no applications. And this one, sometimes people are scratching their head about. So I find what's most effective with this is when the people who come to the showings are walking around, you can ask them, you could say, what would it take to make you want to rent this property right now? And they'll tell you. Sometimes people will be very honest, sometimes too honest. We had a property that we were renting in the downtown core, and it was really quite a nice property, but the inside looked a little bit dated. And so we had this exact dilemma. We had lots of appointments, no applications. And we asked people, what would it take for you to pull the trigger? And probably 3 or 4 people said, well, for the same price, I can get a condo in the same area, and I love the area, but I can get something that's newer and more current looking. So I gave that feedback to the owner of the property, and what she ended up doing was she did some painting, she changed the light fixtures, she changed some of the hardware to kind of make the whole place look more current, and she did put new appliances in the kitchen. And after she did that, the place rented within a week. So that advice worked perfectly. That was exactly what the tenants wanted. So my advice there is to go back to the tenants that are seeing the property and say, what would it take to make you pull the trigger? And they'll let you know. You can decide from there. The thing that I wanted to mention about ads is you kind of have to keep tweaking them because advertising results vary from month to month and season to season. Like we had a property that we had originally advertised in November, and it was a beautiful property. It was brand spanking new. It was in mint condition, but it took a couple months to rent because we were renting it in November and December, which is not a great time of year to rent properties. And we had to drop the price several times before it finally rented. We rented that same property in the springtime, and probably within a week after I posted the ad, it was rented. And we rented it at a top price. So watch what's going on seasonally with the ads, with the pricing, with how much inventory is on the market, and you can keep tweaking your ad to kind of fit with what's going on with the current market. And then we need to ask, lastly, where should you advertise? And this varies depending on what region and area you are in. As mentioned before, I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and where I like to advertise is Rent Board and Rent Faster. That's where I find I get the best tenants, the highest quality tenants, and people who are serious about renting a property. I have also advertised at Kijiji, but I didn't get the same results. I didn't get the same quality of tenant. a lot of people have very good success with Kijiji, and a lot of people have really good success on Facebook, on the rental groups or Facebook Marketplace. It really depends on where tenants in your area look for properties. So one way that you can check is just do a Google search for rental properties and see which platforms pop up. Like where do people commonly look? You can also check with landlord and tenant groups and see where people look for properties or where they advertise for properties, and Facebook groups are good with that. In Calgary and Edmonton, there are municipal landlord organizations. Calgary has Calgary Residential Rental Organization. Edmonton has Alberta Residential Landlord Organization, ARLA. And you could phone them and ask them, where do people advertise? Where do landlords advertise for properties? Where do tenants look for properties? And they'll tell you. So those are a few hints on where you can look for properties. I've known people in the States who advertised on Craigslist or Zillow or any number of other platforms, but it's specific to the area that you live in. So you need to figure out, where do tenants in your area look for properties and post there. Back to Paul. As mentioned, Paul's dilemma was not permanent. So, he'd get rid of that tenant and then he could take a look at the tenant screening process. So we've taken a look at advertising and about who you want, and now we're going to get into the screening part of the tenant screening process. And by the way, this is the same screening process that I've used for my properties for 18 years, and I've never had anyone who hasn't paid me. I've never had anyone trash my property. So we also had very good success with our property management business using the screening process. So I'm going to walk you through it right now. So the first step is the telephone pre-screen. So this is, tenants have looked at your ad online and they've either texted you or they phoned you. And what I recommend is that you send them a quick text or a phone call and say, do you have 5-6 minutes for a brief phone call with me so that I can book your appointment? And then they can give you a call or you can give them a call. And then while you have them on the phone, you can ask them these 7 questions. So how many pets do you have? And what's the weight, breed, etc. So notice I didn't say, do you have any pets? Because whenever I ask tenants, do you have pets? I don't always get an honest answer, because a lot of people don't consider their pets to be pets. They consider them to be family members or like a brother or sister or friend or something. So they won't even call it a pet. Or you have people who pets it for, a family member or neighbor or something. And so they might not consider themselves a pet owner, but they still have pets that they're living with a fair amount of time. So if you ask, how many pets do you have? Then they're more inclined to give you an honest answer. I also like to ask how many people will be occupying this property. And then you'll get a whole range of people. Almost never give me numbers. They always talk about, oh, well, my husband's 2 kids from his first marriage are going to be spending the weekend with us. And then I have my 2 kids with me full time. And then my mother-in-law comes to visit with me. So usually I sit and I write down all the different people that they're talking about. And I know, okay, so that's 5 people who are going to be occupying the property with you. So 6 people in total. You want to make sure you're getting all the information. Then ask, how long of a lease do you want? Because if they want short-term and you want a long-term tenant, that's not going to work. What date would you like to move in? So you need to see if that coincides with the date that your property is available. Would you be able to provide landlord and work references? Because those will be references you will ask for on the application form. Would you be able to give me permission to run a credit check? Because that's something else you'll be asking for. And could you tell me why you're moving out of your current place? And that's a nice tell-in question as well. Sometimes people will give you a whole earful about how they're suing their last 3 landlords, in which case you can find a reason to let them move on. So why am I asking these pre-screening questions? I want to ask these pre-screening questions because I already know how many people can legally live in my property and how many people I'm comfortable living in my property and whether or not the property accepts pets, etc. So I need to only schedule showings for people who fit the criteria. You don't want to waste your time driving down, doing the showings, waiting around for people if you know that they are not going to be suitable tenants for your property. So screen them out on the phone call. And then once you've discovered that these people are indeed good and you want to see them and give them a showing, then send them a text tenant appointment that shows the time and the date and the location. And then also tell them that they need to text you or phone you 1 hour prior to their appointment to confirm that they're coming. And if they don't text or they don't call, then you're not coming, and be very firm on that. Because you don't want to drive down for people who are going to be no-shows. That's really annoying and demoralizing, and you don't need to go through that. Then when you're actually in the showing with the tenants who texted you 1 hour prior and followed instructions really well, then you're asking them pretty much the same questions that you asked them during your pre-screen on the phone. And you're just listening. You're just checking for consistency. You're getting a feel for who they are. You're getting a feel for, are they telling you the same things they told you over the phone? That's still a big part of the interview, to see if this is somebody that you want in your property who'd be suitable and who you would be comfortable working with for a long-term relationship if it's a long-term tenancy. And if they are interested and you like them and they want to fill out an application form, then you will give them an application form. And on your application form, it should include their full legal name, their current address, their current work and personal phone numbers, their date of birth, a 1 to 5 year work history if they have it, 1 to 5 year residence history if they have it, 3 work and or landlord references, or as many as they have, and permission to run a credit check. And I will mention that you do have to have permission to run a credit check. You need a form with a signature and a date on it that indicates that they have given you permission to run a credit check on them. More on that later. On your application, you're also going to be asking for verification of identification. And it's very standard practice for application forms to request picture ID, so a driver's license, government issued ID like a driver's license, and or a passport, but it has to be government issued ID with their photo and their information. You can also ask for documentation from work, for instance, a recent pay stub, and it needs to be a 30-day pay stub. And so just to recap what we've talked about so far, we've talked about a lot of stuff. We've talked about pre-screening your tenants over the phone to make sure that the people that you're actually showing your property to are tenants that you would be considering renting to. We mentioned what to do during the showing and also what to have in your application form when the tenants choose to move forward with their application. So step 4 is the credit check. And I like to run this before I run landlord or work references. And I do that because if the person can afford your property and they have good credit, then I will proceed with the rest of the application. If their credit rating is horrible and they've got a history of not paying their bills or collections or liens, I know I am not going to rent to them, because rent is just another bill. And if they don't pay their bills on time and they don't place a value on paying their bills on time, they're not going to pay you either. So let them move on. And if their credit rating is good, and I'll tell you what a good credit rating is, then you move on with the landlord and the work references. So what is a good credit rating? Credit reports will show you a numeric value, so 1 to 1,000. 1 is horrible, horrible credit rating. 1,000 is fabulously fantastic. So the minimum credit score that most landlord credit bureaus recommend is 600. So a numeric score of 600. So usually what a credit score of 600 means is that they pay their bills on time every month. They might have a little bit of a high debt load, a lot of people do, but they have no trouble paying their bills on time every month. So that's really good. Anything above 600 is excellent. That means they've got lots of extra money, they don't have debts, and they pay their bills on time every month, and they're good as gold. If their credit score is below 600, or there are liens or collections, you want to stay away from them. Because, as mentioned before, if they don't place a value on paying their bills, they're not going to pay the rent either. And then just a reminder, You do have to ask permission to run a credit check. I would not accept a credit check that a tenant runs on their own, because you don't. It's easy to forge credit checks, and it's also easy to forge pay documents and all kinds of things. So if you're running a credit check yourself, you know that what you got is the right version of the credit check. So I would run it myself, and I would give them a form to run a credit check. More on that later. By the way, if you stick around to the end, you get a credit permission to run a credit check form will be included in as one of the things that you can have for free. And now we're on step 5. So assuming that their credit check was good, they had 600 or above, you can move forward with their reference checks and their landlord and work references. Oh, and one thing I didn't mention about credit checks. Bankruptcies I view very differently than a history of bad credit. Bankruptcies can happen to anybody. Someone's business can go under. During the pandemic, lots of people's businesses went under. That wasn't because they were bad people or they did anything wrong. It's just, it happened, right? The same thing, anybody can experience health issues that prevent them from working. People have deaths in a family or divorce. They get off the rails somehow. They have trouble getting back on. And as long as people can prove that their bankruptcy is discharged and that they have made progress in establishing good credit again, and you can get a form from a bank manager that shows that their account is in good standing, then I wouldn't have a problem renting to somebody who had filed for bankruptcy, because we've had a number of tenants who did, and they were excellent tenants. But they have to jump through a few hoops first in order for you to approve them. So once you've done that, then you're ready to move on to the reference checks. So how many reference checks should you have? Well, you should have 1 to 3 landlord references and 1 to 3 work references. And what I always do with references and with tenants is I run social media checks on everybody. I run social media checks on tenants. I run Google searches on all the references. And I want to see what comes up. So once you run social media checks, all kinds of things will come up, like LinkedIn profiles, where you can verify their employment history, news articles, items, all kinds of stuff will come up that is well worth your while to find out before you get somebody into your property. What you want to do is with the social media checks and the Google checks, you want to verify their work references. So you want to verify that the company that your tenant says that they work for and or their work references from is actually a company, a legit company. So you go online and you verify the company and you find the phone number from online. And I always call that number to ask for the work reference. I never call the number that's listed on the application form. And then if the person at the front desk says, oh yes, that person is here, I'll transfer your call, or they've got a remote cell, you can reach at this number, then call that. That's one way to verify if the work references are legit. Social media is the other way. And then you want to prepare your landlord or your reference questions in advance, because you want to be prepared to ask them these questions. And the rule of thumb is that you ask the question and you wait. You don't comment on anything, because silence makes people uncomfortable. And you want them to do as much talking as they humanly can so that you can assess what's going on and the validity of their responses. So you'll ask them, how long have you known this person and in what capacity? And they can say, oh, I've known them 5 years and they've worked, for me as a tradesperson in this site for X amount of years. What can you tell me about them? And so people will tell you all kinds of things, but what you're looking for are themes or patterns of behavior. You're looking for reliability, dependability, ability to get work done when promised, whether they're polite and respectful to their colleagues. And then that leads me to the next question. Tell me about a time when they were in a conflict situation and walk me through how they resolved it, because you want to see how they deal with conflict, because you're not always going to get along with your tenants' ideas and vice versa. Sometimes tenants will see things their way, you'll see things your way. You need to work it out somehow, and you need to know how they deal with those sorts of things when they come up. And then these 2 questions are the last 2. So if you were a landlord, would you rent to them? And if so, why? And it's funny because a lot of the work references that I call in Alberta are landlords. They own multiple properties, and they'll say, well, yeah, actually, I am a landlord, and I've rented this person for these reasons. So they're very familiar with this question, puts them in a good comfort zone. And then I always ask, is there anything else you want to tell me that I haven't asked? So this gives them a chance to think, a chance for you to listen and write notes, and you'll see what kind of comes up. Now, when you're dealing with landlord references, they can sometimes be a little bit easier than work references, not always. Again, run a Google search on the property management company if the tenant's property was managed by a property management company. Look up the number online and call that number. Don't call the one on their application form. So you're verifying the property management online. But sometimes properties are owned by private landlords, like me, for instance. Property managers are not managing my properties, I am. And so, how would somebody know that I am a legit landlord? Well, if it's a private landlord, there are a couple things you can do. One is you can pretend you're looking for a place to live, and you call the landlord and you say, I understand you've got a house for rent, blah blah blah, and I'd like to rent it. And if they say, oh no, I don't rent a property, I've never rented properties, then they're busted. They're a fake landlord reference. The other thing you can do is you can run a title search on the property and see if the name on the title matches the name of the landlord on the application. That's usually pretty accurate. It's not always 100% accurate because sometimes titles change names or transferred. So, but it is a good way to go. And between the two of them, you can usually get a good feel for the landlord. Well, between that and also social media, you can also check the landlord's identity on social media and see if it turns out. And then you have landlord questions that you want to ask. And so those landlord questions are, could you please verify the name and the address of where Jane Tenant rented from you? And if they can rattle it off really easily, then great. If they're stumbling, they don't remember, or they're trying to make up an address, then take note, because that's not a good sign. How long did they rent from you? What dates did they rent for you? I mean, they should be able to rattle those things off fairly easily if the tenant is recent. Did they pay their rent on time every month? That's a good question. Because sometimes people pay their rent, but it's not on time and it's not every month. Did you receive any complaints? And by the way, if you register your tenant through Landlord Lobby, if you register for Landlord Lobby, you can register tenant payments on that site, and then those are attached to their credit rating. So if you have good tenants who want to keep building up their credit, that's excellent for them. If you have tenants who are skipping out on the rent, prior to the last couple of years, tenants could do that and it didn't affect their credit rating, but it does now. So that's why it's a good reason to go onto Landlord Lobby and register your tenants and your properties. And you can check Canada-wide with tenants with their database there. So it's excellent. Did you receive any complaints? Did they damage the property? Did they have any pets? Did they bring in any unregistered guests? And were they polite and respectful to you and the neighbors throughout the tenancy? So these are all good questions to ask, and they will bring up some very telling answers. And if I find with good references, people can usually spill information fairly quickly. If it's somebody that is not a great tenant, and the landlord doesn't want to shoot themselves in the foot or be seen as being harsh, or they're afraid of getting sued, they're going to be very cautious with their answers. So pay attention to how they respond, not just to the responses, but how they respond. And that's very telling as well. So why don't I use personal references? Well, I don't find that they're very reliable, because if people are listing a personal reference, they're going to list a family friend, a neighbor, relative, priest. I mean, are any of those people going to give someone a bad reference? No. I mean, would your friends give you a bad reference? My friends would certainly give me great references, but mine are true. But I find that personal references are not reliable, so I always go with work references and with tenant references. Also, work references are more apt to give you an honest answer, because they're not only representing themselves, they're representing the company, and they know that their employee is representing the company too. So they're kind of bound to err more on the side of caution and on providing honesty. So what does your information tell you about the tenant? We've now gotten a lot of information from the tenant. We've done a pre-screening where we asked them questions. We met them in person, where we asked them the same questions and let them talk about any and everything and, paid attention. You've seen how they've acted towards you during the application process, and that's very telling because, people are polite and respectful and they're okay jumping through all the hoops that you ask them to jump through. That's great because they're probably in a stressful situation, and if they're polite and respectful when they're stressed out, great. If they're throwing all kinds of attitude and they don't want to do it, and it's like pulling teeth to get information and they're rude to you, let them go. You don't need those people. You've also seen their credit score, so you know what their spending habits are and their paying habits. You've talked to their employers, you've talked to their landlords, and you check their social media profiles. So what's your impression of the tenant? Like, do you have a good picture of them? Do you want to work with them? Is this somebody you want in your property? Oh, and by the way, one thing I forgot to mention about credit, and that is the person's rent shouldn't be more than a third of their bills. So if I've had tenants who had a job and had a good history of payment, but their rent was $2,000 and their total expenses, their phone bill, their car payments, their student loans were like $1,950. So they had $50 leeway. So that was way too high. So I did not accept those people because if they have an emergency, then they're not going to be able to pay the rent. So you've got all this information. You've got the pre-screening questions. You've met them in person. You've seen how they've acted towards you. You've got their credit score. You've talked to their employers and their landlords, and you've checked their social media profiles. Now you can make an informed decision about whether or not to accept them into your property. So here's the process. Once again, there's advertising. There are the pre-screening questions. There's the application. There's a credit check. And then there's verifying the references. So I frequently get asked when I tell new landlords about this process, holy cow, Nelda, won't that process scare off the tenants? And my answer is no. Tenants are happy to follow the process. Tenants are happy to follow the process. They're kind of like a kid with a report card. And a kid with a good report card wants you to see the report card. A bad tenant will get scared off, or they'll get scared off throughout the process, or you can catch them if they've got false claims or false references. Sorry, I'm getting a little messed up between my screens here. So I wanted to give you a special offer. So I need to get back onto the screen again and share my screen. I'm going to pull my PowerPoint presentation up again. I also wanted to answer a couple questions that came my way. Okay. Okay, having a little bit of difficulty with technology, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, so my special offer is I have 3 editable documents for you. They are a credit check authorization, 10 work reference questions, and a fillable application form. And if you want them, you can email me at nelda@neldaschulte.com and I'll email them your way. And if you like this webinar, it's available in a very detailed step-by-step version called Find the Best Tenants, and it's on my website, which is www.neldaschulte.com. So I'm going to end the show. There we go. Now I've got where I wanted to go. Okay. So here we go. Here's Find the Best Tenants. And I'm going to go one back for the special offer so that you can email me at nelda@neldaschulte.com. And I will give you all of this information for the credit check authorization and the tenant work reference questions and a fillable application form. There were a couple questions that I wanted to answer that kind of came up. Jean from Lethbridge had said, does Rentboard have the same pricing tool that RentFaster has? And no, it doesn't, but they do offer ad statistics, which are also really helpful. And then we've got another question asking is, if I price my ad at $2,000 this week and then raise the price in 2 weeks, is that allowable? Yes, it is. You can raise the price of your ad, of your property in a couple weeks, but once people have actually signed a form at a certain price, then you can't change the price. So, I mean, signed your lease at a certain price, you can't change the price. But you can change the price of your property while you're advertising it. And do you get better results having a professional photographer take pictures of a rental property? Well, not really. We've had professional pictures taken, and I've taken my own. After a while, you kind of know how to angle your camera so that you're getting a good picture of the room. So, I mean, if you really hate taking pictures and your pictures are horrible, maybe, but if you're not bad taking pictures, then use your room. Someone else wrote in and said, I've got a lot of trouble writing ads. What should I do? And practice, or if you're just terrible at it, have somebody proof your ad or have somebody write it for you. But I think practicing and seeing what kind of results you get are the best way to learn how to write a good ad. And then the last question is, what if I don't know what kinds of tenants I want? Well, you can check the area, pay attention to the types of people that live in that area. And that kind of tells you kind of what kinds of tenants are attracted to your neighborhood and to your property. And also, you have minimum housing and health standards. So minimum housing and health allow a certain amount of people in sleeping spaces and using bathrooms and kitchens and stuff. So you can check minimum housing and health, and that'll tell you how many. And you can check your neighborhood, and that'll tell you who lives there. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Nelda Schulte, and my website is neldaschulte.com. Email me at nelda@neldaschulte.com to get your free forms, to grab them. Grab those free forms that are editable, by the way. And or if you want to take the course, I highly recommend you take it because you can listen to it either on audio or you could watch it on a video, and it's all there for you on www.neldaschulte.com under Find Best Tenants. And it's extremely reasonably priced, under $30, so great deal. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you very much for joining me. Have yourself a wonderful day.